Welcome to the Slade Ham experiment. I love saying that. Weekly, I get to do it. I don't know how many of these we've done. It's got to be approaching a year's worth. Hi, if it's your first time. I'm Slade Ham. Hopefully, we're going to learn something tonight. I probably will. I do every episode. I say something I didn't expect, and then I got to go ponder it. The midnight spaceship is aglow. One of my lights is out. It's been replaced by candles. I'm drinking hot chocolate tonight in an attempt to rekindle the last few burning embers of winter. It's the end of February, and down here in Texas, it's got to be 85 or 90 degrees. So I'm trying to fake it. I've turned the air conditioner down very low. Now I'm drinking hot chocolate. I've been drinking some fantastic teas. We're going to talk a lot about Japan is going to be the theme of the episode. I am eager. I'm probably going to come back with an entire suitcase full of tea. And my main goal is to come back with a teapot, some sort of brewing device that is authentically Japanese, and it makes me feel good about my tea drinking. Thank you to fan Mary for the wonderful care package of Carabello's coffee and tea from Kentucky. I have become, if there's anybody from Carabello's listening, I have become quite the fan. I'm now working my way through 4 or 5 or 6 different blends, and everything they seem to roast is magic. So I'll be back on the teas and coffees tomorrow. Tonight, I am on the hot chocolate and into the land of Japan. And I'm there in my head because I'm going there. I leave in, what is today? The end of February. I leave in just under 2 weeks, and I'll be in Japan for just over 2 weeks. And I'm excited. It's not my first time to go, so part of me already has a built-in expectation. I think I've seen most of Japan, at least like run by it and touched it. But in the process of going back and trying to fill in some of these blanks, some of these things are very, as I write this new book and I'm working on some things, I'm having some really nostalgic ventures here. And it's involved me looking back at like past tours to fill in some blanks or revisiting some previous stories. And it's been fun. So I'm doing this for Japan. And I think back, I've been 4 times now. And this will be my 5th. And the first time I went is there's a reason that I've tried to buy back every copy of my first album. No one has it. No one. You don't have it. You think you do. You don't. I put out an album in 2001, well before I should have. I'd been doing comedy for a year. And I thought I could put out an album. And I recorded a half hour. And I released it, and I padded it with on-the-street audio footage of my time in Japan. I went with a comedian named Don Chernagle, who at the time was out of Iowa. Then he moved to Vegas. I don't know where he lives now. Was a really good friend of mine for a very long time. Still, I guess, is or would be. We've fallen out of touch. Don's a good dude. So we went, and Don, being a good old corn-fed white boy from Iowa, was not the most exploratory. For all the fun we had, he was not going to be my adventure buddy when I wanted to wander into the streets of Japan. Don left me to do a lot of that on my own, and in a couple of instances, he was probably right in hindsight. Because when I go back and if I were to listen to that, I was a very obnoxious Texan on the streets of Japan, and I was probably being very racist. Like, not like angry, malicious racist, just really callously casual. So that was my first trip to Japan. We did shows. We only did a couple of shows. I remember being on the north side in Misawa. And Don was doing I was opening all these shows, and I had no material, far less than the half hour I was supposed to have to do these shows. So Don was closing the shows out, and we did this one show. Sometimes you play for the enlisted folk. The grunts, the men and women on the ground, those are fun shows. Sometimes you're scheduled to play when you play a military base in an officers club. And this was one of those nights. So we played there, and they hated Don. I mean, they hated him. It was because you got to understand officers. Everybody in the room was a fighter pilot or a spouse of a fighter pilot. So I don't know what their expectation in his comedy, and his comedy is admittedly abrasive. You know, he knew what he was doing. I think at some point he probably decided, fuck him too. But they really liked me, inexplicably so. And that night, in the officers club at Misawa Air Base, I got inducted into the 13th Fighter Squadron, the Wild Weasels. I got my coin. I don't know if you can see this. Will that come into focus? I got my coin from the guys, and then they voted on a call sign. And I don't know if it's secret how they do it or whatever, their voting process and how they, whatever. My call sign is Hog, based on my last name, Ham. So to the fine folks and the Wild Weasels, cheers. I guess the 13th and 14th Fighter Squadron was there that night. So that was my introduction to Japan. It was an incredible trip. It was probably the second country I'd been to that wasn't Germany. I was a traveling idiot. Don and I ended up in Okinawa at Kadena, and we went to a Banana Lady show. And it was an eye-opening experience. I will not get graphic with it on this episode, but this woman did things with a banana that will ruin your idea of a food processor. Ugh. Like that. That's the first time I got to see the beautiful blue water of Okinawa. Then in 2006, I went back. This is some of what I've learned about Japan. I went with my buddy J.R. Brow. And if you're gonna travel, you could do far worse than J.R. J.R. is an exceptional comedian. Exceptional. I had no business, I have no business now, but especially in 2006, had no business going after JR. I should have been opening every one of these shows. But we kept playing pool for the order. There was like one show where JR was like, if you can beat me in pool, you can pick the spot. I went, all right. And then I beat him. Because I'm a terrible pool player unless something is on the line. And then for whatever reason, I just find my groove. So I won that game. And then he just kept playing me for the position after that. I think he felt like he had to get me back. I don't know. But he lost every game, and I just got to keep closing the shows unless the show looked like it was going to be rough. And then I just opened it and got it out of the way. We had a fantastic time. We also did Korea on that trip. And I remember being outside Osan Air Base. If you've ever been to Osan Air Base in South Korea, men and women in uniform, you know the wild world that exists right outside that gate. And at night, it's extravagant. It's fun. It's debaucherous. But during the day, it's also this crazy cool shopping little district. And there was a guy selling bootleg porn DVDs, and he had them in a big flip case, like you know what I mean, like you throw in a Camaro in the 90s. And he had them in, and he would try and sell them to you. Oh, come here, it's a DVD. And then he'd open them up and he'd flip through them, and he had the titles written on them, but they were all bootleg. They were all like home burned. So none of the titles were correct. They were all hand to God. Barely Regal. Campus Concussions was in there. That was my trip with JR. We went, so that the only other thing that was of note on that trip, I was dating the psychopath. It's going to be an episode or 12 on its own if I ever decide to dig into codependency on the podcast. Ugh. So she and I were at the tail end. When I say the tail end, I mean the death rattle. You could feel the bone shaking. And I had left for this trip, and I got a message. This back in 2006. So I had a message board on my website, an old UBB. And I got a message through the message board that just said, "I'll see you in Iwakuni," and no name. It just had a screen name. I don't remember what the screen name was, but it was very, like, you couldn't tell. And that should have freaked me out more than it did. So the whole time I'm in Japan, and we're in Korea, and I just keep thinking about that. What does this mean? I'll see you in Iwakuni. So it'll sound like a ninja threat or something, right? Like the plot of Karate Kid 7. And we get to, first of all, we're on the most bootleg tour you can imagine. We're working for this company. The name doesn't matter. But they paid nothing to the comics. It was highway robbery. We all said yes because we didn't know any better. It was work. We wanted to travel the world, blah, blah, blah. Probably the same reason people join the military. So we take these gigs. This is the same company that flew me and Sam Damaris through Yemen. Coach, through Yemen. Hi, guys. You're American. Go to Yemen on a layover. Kick it there. See how that goes. One of the most terrifying, it was terrible in Sana'a. But this company saved like $200 on that flight. So it was just the most horribly run tour in the entire world. So we get these instructions on how to get from A to B to C to D. JR and I don't speak Japanese. There's not a lot of English to be read in Japan. There's no Google Translate at the time. I was ecstatic to know that color screen cell phones were coming. That's what I was excited about in 2006. Directions were still printed out MapQuest things. So I have all of these in Japanese. We're trying to navigate from the north down to Tokyo and then over to Iwakuni, which is by Hiroshima. So we have to take the bullet train and figure out the stop and this and that. And the whole time I'm just trying to figure out what crazy person is on the other end of the line. And when we got there, the girl who came to pick us up was my old, like, high school, not high school, but right after high school crush. And I hadn't seen her in 10 years, maybe. And she was working for the MWR or the Navy, whoever it was over at Navy Recreation, whoever it was over at Iwakuni. She picked us up. And if I'd known that me and that crazy trifling girl were breaking up a couple of months later, might have been a different trip to Iwakuni. But alas, I did not. But she and I did go to one of the most, that's the roundabout way of me telling you one of my favorite moments in Japan. Man, I'm not going to get to anything I wanted to talk about. Miyajima Island, which is one of the most magical spots in Japan. It's the home of the largest torii gate, the big red gates, the entrances to Shinto shrines, the markers, if you will, between, as one would say, the mundane and the miraculous. Will sort of mark your entrance into that world. There are so many shrines on Miyajima Island. That's one place I am determined to go back and explore. I was back there in Japan in 2013. I went with my buddy Sam Easton, who I think was in Final Destination 36 or something. And that's when I got to see a lot of stuff. I saw Fuji. We hit all the camps on Okinawa. I drank Habu sake for the second time, which is the snake venom sake. That was the good Okinawa trip where I spent a lot of time on Araha Beach. There's American Village down there. Okinawa. Let's talk about Okinawa because that's where I've spent all the rest of my time in Japan. And then that'll lead me to what I wanted to talk about anyway. In 2014, I went back there with George Wallace, which is one of my coolest comedy moments. One of the ones I'll take to my grave. If we have time, I'll come back to it. If we don't, a different episode. But Okinawa is this weird, it's part of Japan. It's a prefecture of Japan. But geographically, it's closer to Taiwan, has Chinese influences. It was its own nation for forever until when was it? 1879. That's when it became a Japanese prefecture. So it's kind of got its own identity, its own mythology, its own cuisine, its own culture, its own language. And then the Americans showed up in the 1940s after World War II. We promised that we would protect Japan for forever. We're going to put our base right there. And now, pushing 80 years later, there's a nice little American village. So Okinawa is, the further south you are, the more shitty and American it is. There's American Village, has a Ferris wheel and an A&W, all that stuff, taco rice stands, all the military dragging their family around. It's American Village. It might as well be a mall. And the further north you go, the more Okinawa gets. There's some of the best snorkeling and scuba diving I've ever seen at Maida Point. That's where I was introduced to scuba. There's a sea cave there that my friend Michelle took us out to. It was just me and her. Took me out to, and I there was a sea turtle, and we swam with it. When I came back up, I went, "Oh my God, you can do this with a tank on your back!" And she was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, I gotta get certified." Here's the thing about Okinawa. Also, Okinawa has shisha dogs. You won't find these anywhere else in the world either. This one has its mouth closed. I brought these back from there. There's another one with its mouth open. The one with its mouth closed wards off the evil spirits, right? Or the one with what is it? The one with its mouth open sucks in the evil spirits, and the one with its mouth closed keeps the good within. Some myth that I've left them on my desk or my studio table since I brought them back the first time. So now 12, 15. God, dog. So the time with George Wallace was extraordinary. But the Okinawans, what you should know about them more than anything, they are some of the longest lived people in the world. They fall into, Okinawa does, one of 5, they're called blue zones. And I didn't know this. I knew the Okinawan people lived a long time. The average age of a blue zone person is 87. 87 years old is the average age. You know how many people over 100 live in Oki? So what I did, I looked up what a blue zone was. Because it's not just Okinawa. There's 4 others. I'll list them in a moment. These are the things they found all 5 of these blue zones had in common. 1, the people move naturally. They don't have gyms. They don't pump iron. They don't run marathons. They do stuff in their day-to-day life that requires them to use their bodies. Oh, how novel. We're so stupid. 2, the people in all of these zones, they all had purpose. Seems like a simple thing. But basically, why they wake up in the morning. Something significantly lacking, as I continuously talk about my hometown. 3 is an important one. All of these cultures downshift, which means they all have built into their culture some way of relieving stress, a break in their day, a siesta, if you will. Something that intentionally forces them out of the rhythm of gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. They also dietarily adhere to what's called an 80% rule. Hey, where have we heard that before? 80-20. They choose to stop eating when they're 80% full. The Okinawans say a 2,500-year-old Confucian mantra before every meal. It reminds them to stop eating when their stomachs are 80% full. The 20% gap between being hungry or not being hungry and feeling full could be the difference between losing weight or gaining it. These people are right on the cusp of all things healthy. People in blue zones eat their smallest meals late in the afternoon or early evening, and then they don't eat anymore for the rest of the day. More about the diet. Most of them have a plant-heavy diet. That's where they start to lose me. I got a lot of learning to do here. Beans, including fava, black soy, and lentils, the cornerstone of most 100-year-old people's diets, and they eat meat rarely. Also, in all of the blue zones, except one, and I'll explain, drink wine. And the healthiest, a Sardinian Okinawa wine. We'll talk about them in a moment. And then some of these others, these other three, they're all kind of together. A sense of belonging, putting loved ones first, and finding the right tribe are all traits of people who live to be 100 in these 5 zones. Now, Okinawa was one of them. Sardinia, a little island off the coast of Italy, is the second location. The third, Nicoya, little spot in Costa Rica, out on the west side, the Guanacanaste. Ikaria, an Aegean island, I believe off the coast of Greece. And the fifth, this is the weird one, an Adventist community in Loma Linda, California, where they outlive the average American by almost a decade. It's too significant to be an accident. But if you look at all of these places, the things they have in common, we pretty much just listed. One of the most intriguing, the Okinawans. When I say the right tribe is important, in Okinawa, they create what are called, I will totally mispronounce this, moais, M-O-A-I-S. Groups of 5 friends that are committed to each other for life. What an incredible concept. These safety nets lend financial and emotional support in times of need. They give their members the stress-shedding security of knowing there is always somebody there for them. In Okinawa, at age 5, children are put into these committed social networks. All right, that may be a little crazy. One specific moai that was discovered had been together for 97 years. The average age of the group is 102. Jesus Christ, they meet every day to drink sake and gossip, and if one of them does not show up, the other 4 put on their kimonos to walk across the village and check on their friend. Oh, are you kidding me? These are important things in all of these societies. Successful centenarians in all of these blue zones usually keep aging parents and grandparents nearby or in the home. They also commit to a life partner, which can add, they say, up to 3 years of life expectancy, and invest in their children with time and love so that they'll be more likely to care for them when they get older. These are all important traits that none of us have access to or possess. The Loma Lindans don't drink, so that's an excuse, but the rest of them, they all get down with the wine. Now, you think some of this might be hokey, some of this might be bullshit, except Ikaria, this little island in the Aegean Sea, they live 8 years longer than Americans do. That's the average right there. They experience 20% less cancer, half the rate of heart disease, almost zero dementia. So one Ikarian in particular man by the name of Stamatis Moritis. No one should listen to the way I pronounce anything on this show ever. He moved to America when he was 22 to pursue the American dream. He was a painter. He started having success almost immediately. He bought a house. He got married. He had 3 kids. At the age of 66, right around the time most Americans are starting to think of death, old Stamatis, which sounds like a disease in himself, developed terminal lung cancer. They said, "You're going to die." He said, "All right, if I'm going to die," that's not how he talks. Instead of dying in America, he decided to move back to Ikaria. He moved in with his parents. That's the thing you do. He started breathing the air there, drinking the wine, eating a Mediterranean diet. After a few months, he planted a garden, figuring he'd never harvest what he was planting. 37 years later, he had a vineyard producing 200 liters of wine a year. There's an article in the New York Times. He's dead now, but you can go back to 2012. If I can remember, I'll post the link in the show notes. They wrote an article called "The Island Where People Forget to Die." I don't know enough about anything to know anything. So maybe this is magic fruit and magic water, and it's curing people, and we're just sitting here soaking in our chemicals. And it's probably true. We know why we die. Okinawans live forever. I'm going back to Japan. I'm excited about it. Before I get out of here, I'll give you a couple of quick notes about where I'm playing. I'll be in Japan for the big 2 weeks in March, April 2nd through the 20th. I will be in Egypt, Kenya, Djibouti, Niger, Niger, and Qatar, bringing a good group with me. Colorado Springs, I'm coming for you May 5th and 6th. The next week, May 11th through the 13th, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. May 19th through 20th, I'll be in Dallas, Texas at my favorite club, Hyenas. Then in July, Kerrville, Texas. I'll tell you where when I find out. I don't know. And then in July, I'm also going back to Canada. On the 18th, I'll be in Toronto. And then the 25th in Ottawa. We'll wrap things up. I'll come back. I'll tape the special. Life will be great. All the dates, sladeham.com. Sign up to my newsletter. You can get those along with some yippee stuff I send out every 2 weeks. None of it's spam. It's just me talking. And before I get out of here, the George Wallace story was cool because we were doing 3 shows together. We did not know each other, the legendary George Wallace. And it was just me and him. The first show I went up and he watched my show and I did fine. And he just said, "Good show." Then the second night, he watched it a little bit closer. And when he went back up, he made sure the crowd gave me another round of applause. And it was very, very cool to get that acknowledgement from him. And then the show we did at Kadena was like the last show, and at this point had seen my act several times, and he watched that I was changing things up, and he had seen every show. And this is what was awesome: when I brought him on stage, he had paid attention to every joke I told that night. And before I could leave the stage, he brought me back up. He pulled up 2 chairs, and we started talking like a talk show, back and forth, entertaining the audience. And he was just bringing up every bit that I didn't do that night and setting me up to spike these volleyballs. So, George Wallace, you son of a bitch, thank you for that night. Japan, I'm coming back for a whole lot more. A Slade Runner episode on that for sure, and another episode of the Slade Ham Experiment very, very soon. Thanks for hanging out.